morning, everyone. I wanted to get a little bit of sunshine and fresh air, so I'm sitting out on the patio, keeping the table, sorry about that, and wanted to answer some questions that I've been getting recently. I got a question via email recently from someone who wanted to know what the secret is to finding a compatible partner. This is something that they've really been struggling with for some time. There are a few different aspects to it. The first is to make sure that there's some overlap between the person that you are and the person that the people that you're looking to date are looking for. This can sometimes be the trickiest, but it's most easily solved by looking at yourself, taking an honest inventory of the parts of you that are the biggest draws. What is it about you that is the most authentically attractive? And finding ways to play that up. You might be drawn immediately towards looking at your flaws and finding ways to mitigate them or reduce them, and that's important and worthwhile. But I would suggest saving that for after you've focused on playing up your strengths and the parts of you that are magnetic, the parts of you that are big draws, and to developing your strengths. And the reason for that is because self-improvement is a never-ending journey. You will always have flaws, you will always have parts of yourself that you want to change or that you feel repel people. Hi Darren, hi Heidi, it's good to see you both. But that's not what people stay or leave in relationships for. People stay or leave in relationships, and people enter into relationships based on who a person is, based on the ideal of who a person is. And so it makes more sense, especially initially, to invest in the ideal of who you are, to identify the archetype of who you are as a person, and to build on that. For example, one of my clients on the East Coast was discussing this with me, and they found that as a person, my archetype, and they felt that this was a big barrier between them and meeting women. And I said there are a lot of women who are specifically drawn to that type. What you need to do is spend more time telegraphing that that's who you are as a person. And especially since as soon as you start talking about those subjects, you just light up. And so we spent time working on developing a wardrobe and body language that choreographed that more, and looking more for language for events and for conversational openers that would allow them to show who they were while also inviting those aspects of the people that they were with out to play. Because that's another thing that's very important to drawing people in, is looking at the type of person that you're attracted to and thinking about the type of person that they want to become, and looking at the ways in which they want to be drawn out. Maybe you're really attracted to shy people who are looking to be drawn out of their shells, and you can be a great benefit to their lives by inviting them out to different events, or by encouraging them to do things that they might not otherwise do, like try karaoke. Hi Mia, hi Brian. It's good to see you. Or maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe you're somebody who is very shy yourself, and one of the things that you bring to connections is a chance to go more inward and to spend more time being introspective and slowing down to appreciate life moment by moment. So the more you spend time telegraphing that to the people around you, especially to your friends and to people who you're just meeting, because oftentimes these are the people who are evaluating you and determining whether or not you're a good potential romantic partner. the easier it's going to be to find people to date and to connect with both romantically and sexually. The second piece that is really important is to identify and get really, really clear on your filters. And that's both filtering in and filtering out. Thinking about the things that are your must-haves, that are absolutely core, that are crucial to have in a relationship. For example, I've found out the hard way that it's very important for me to, especially in my long-term connections, to be in relationships with people who are committed to doing ongoing personal growth work and who are committed to their values over their personal comfort. That is an absolute core must-have for me. Another core must-have for me, because I have 3 cats, is people who like, or at least can be persuaded to like, cats. A deal breaker is something that you absolutely cannot deal with or should not be in a relationship with somebody that's going on. For example, for some people, someone who is very loud or expressive or demonstrative in their anger. Absolutely. I know that's one that's important to and luckily there are a lot of communities out there that are devoted to personal growth, which are really good places for those of us who are drawn to that, to do our relationships and our partner shopping. But when it comes to the don'ts, people who are very demonstrative in their anger or very expressive in their anger, for a lot of people with abuse histories, that can be a huge trigger. And seeing somebody who is going to make rapid, jerky gestures when they're upset, or who is going to push objects or, hit a pillow is usually the example that people give. If you're somebody who's seeing that just shut you down or makes you feel frozen or vulnerable, that might be a deal breaker for you in a relationship. And in a case where it isn't a deal breaker, it might be something that a lot of heavy negotiating goes into to find a compromise that works for you with the partner who is very demonstrative in their anger, assuming that this is somebody who isn't abusive but who just has a different anger style. And that's something that a lot of relationship guides don't get into, is that different people growing up in different home environments have different expressive anger and different anger and conflict resolution styles. And those can be as individual as our personalities. And identifying and understanding your partner's conflict style and the way that they express their anger is vital to living with them. If you're somebody who cohabits with your partners, it's vital to understanding how to resolve conflict with them. If you're somebody who has a more anxious attachment style, it can be vital to understanding the difference between a conflict that your partner is going to step away from because they need to cool down and then return to, and a conflict that your partner is going to walk away from and not come back from. Or not come back to, rather. Hi, Dane. Hi, Francesca. Welcome. And so that's a subset of filters that can be really important to consider. But it all goes into identifying what are the things that are your absolute deal breakers and what are the things that you can compromise on. For example, I found that for me, it's an absolute deal breaker to be with somebody who is intentionally cruel in ways that are not pre-negotiated. That is just not something that works for me. Hi, Andrea. Something that's a little bit more of a soft no, or a softer, not a deal breaker, but something that has to be negotiated, is people who are allergic to cats. Some of my lovers are allergic to cats, and that just means a little bit of extra effort when it comes to coordinating schedules and figuring out where we're going to meet up. because it makes coming over to my place a little bit more challenging, and it means, running the air filter in advance, closing off the room, that sort of thing. Or it means me going to them at the times when that's available. Another example of something that would be a soft no, or maybe not a deal breaker, but something that needs to be negotiated, is if you're somebody who has kids, thinking about when your partners, whether they're sexual or romantic partners, or if you do friends with benefits, whatever connection style you personally have, when do the people that you're connecting with meet your kids? Do they meet you right away? Does it depend on the person? Does it depend on the type of connection that you have? Is the type of relationship that they have with your kids something that you predetermine before you meet them? Or is that something where there's some room to be flexible and negotiate based on who this person is and how they want to relate to your family? I know that when Monica and I first got together, one thing that really meant a lot to me was when I got to meet Riley and Ronan and Mikey, and the four of us got a chance to bond and spend some time together. It was really special to me, and it meant a lot to me to be part of their lives in the Uncle Alex way they have been. And the third piece that is really, really important is to think about what it is that we draw in. Hi, Jessica, welcome. When we identify what it is that we want. This is actually something that I'm going to be going into in depth in my workshop on the 24th. The 3 ways that people can self-sabotage relationships. And those are what you need, what you want, and what you call in, or what you draw into. Or in some cases, what you allow yourself to have. And that's a huge one, because a lot of times people place limits on what they'll allow themselves to have based on what they believe they deserve. And a lot of times people have really ungenerous beliefs about what they believe they deserve. And so if you don't believe deep down that you deserve to have a partner who is compatible with you on a deep level, then you're going to find a lot of different ways to not let yourself have that. You might get very, very, very close, but there will always be something until you decide that you're ready to have that. Hi, Corey. It's good to see you. This is not to say people are not to blame for being in relationships that are unhealthy, relationships that are damaging. That is not something where that is their fault. People are not to blame for being on the receiving end of abuse. That's not how abuse works. That said, when it comes to that's a really good question. There are actually a few different ways to address that directly. One of the ones that I found personally to be the most impactful is doing a lot of personal growth work that's focused on building and strengthening self-worth muscles, especially around vulnerability. If you look at Brene Brown's earlier book, I thought it was just me, but it wasn't. That has a lot of resources around building resilience around vulnerability, and that in turn makes it a lot safer to be vulnerable. That makes it easier to deal with shame because you're building shame resilience.
And that makes it easier because you have more resources to deal with any internalized shame. That makes it easier to believe that you deserve things. And so that work layer after layer makes it easier to allow in, quote unquote, the good stuff. Another big piece is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the emotional freedom technique method tapping, where you tap on different points along the meridians while repeating different phrases to basically to reprogram your brain, because you're giving it physical stimulation and auditory verbal stimulation, cognitive at the same time, and just basically rewiring your brain and your thought processes. A lot of people have found it to be tremendously effective, and so looking up tapping on... Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for letting me know, Jessica. I might not be getting the best signal out here, unfortunately. I'll definitely keep that in mind going forward and use the hotspot next time. But looking up tapping scripts on allowing yourself to have and on receiving, a lot of those will be really, really useful when it comes to allowing yourself to have happiness. Another resource that's really helpful around that is Barbara Carrells' book, Ecstasy is Necessary, and this is one that I frequently recommend to my clients because the exercises in that book are all based around allowing more pleasure into your life and embracing pleasure and desire as compasses that can be really useful for determining what that drives you, for determining what it is that feeds you, and in turn that creates more positive feedback around deserving and allowing them. Hi Eve, it's really good to see you. Welcome. And so the more self-worth work you do, the easier it's going to be to allow yourself to have partners who are compatible. The other piece of this, and this is something that I'm going to go into more in the next video, the other piece is to allow Barbara, and I'm going to type it in as well. Ecstasy is necessary. And you're so welcome. But looking at where what you need and what you want are either in alignment or out of alignment, because the more in alignment what you need is with what you want, the easier it's going to be to have them meet at the same target and get hooked and draw it in. And for those of you who are familiar with the working principles, it's the same basic idea that you want to get really, really clear about your will before you go sending it off into the world. Because if you are willing one thing, if you are, hi Mo, welcome, putting your intention and your focus and your work into one aim, but at the same time you're also focusing on something which is contradictory, what's going to happen is you're going to cock block or clam jam yourself. You're going to end up in a situation where you're blocking your own desires from being fulfilled because they're in conflict with each other. And so it's really worthwhile, especially if you're looking to jump back into the dating pool or going out and seeking some sexual connections, that you're open to turning into going connections, whether they be also romantic or not. Hi Nadine. Hi Megan. Hi Chandon. But whether they're also romantic or not, it's really helpful to
get really clear about what it is that you need in a connection, looking at the filters that we talked about earlier, and looking at what it is that you really want deep down, whether or not it's quote-unquote good for you, whether or not it matches what you need. Because sometimes, even if there is a gap between what you need in a relationship and what you want, sometimes there are ways to bridge it if you get creative. And so it can be really worthwhile to take the time to think about those things so that you can come up with those creative solutions, maybe brainstorming with friends or with your coach. For example, for the longest time, as some of you may remember, when I was working as a pro switch, I was traveling all up and down the East Coast and across the country. And at the same time, I was looking to deepen my relationships and to have a couple of anchor relationships. This sounds like something that would be very challenging, but I was also doing the conference circuit. Hi, Maddie. And so what worked out really well for me was having partners who also traveled, who hit a lot of the same cities that I tended to hit, and who hit a lot of the same conferences. So it was home, who were in my home city, so that I had people in my home, in my base, and I also had connections to love while I was on the road. And that bridge, there was a real disconnect between wanting to deepen and being on the road all the time. But there is almost always a solution if you're able to get creative and look at the places where what you need and what you want in a connection overlap. I've got time for one or two more questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and wrap it because I've got a few things to take care of this morning. I know there's a little bit of delay, so I'm going to give it just a sec. And for those of you who missed it earlier, I'm going to be covering a lot of this material in more depth in the class on the 24th, How to Get What You Want Out of Dating, Sex, and Love. And that actually goes in depth into negotiation, into flirting, into how to have conversations when there's conflict or tension or just stress in the air. How to flirt in such a way that you express your sexual personality so that you can find the people who you're sexually and romantically compatible with through your flirting. And how to work the courage to be vulnerable like that. It's been so long since I've been to Ohio. I miss Ohio. Everybody is so sweet and friendly there. I love it. Let's talk more about coming out to Ohio. I travel, and so if you can get a group together, or if you be open to hosting me, we can make it happen. There's one that's really important to drawing in a compatible partner, and that is displaying emotional availability. A lot of times when we have space in our hearts and in our lives for a new connection, we're still really insulated and isolated and holding the world at a little bit of a distance. Hi, Catherine. And that can make it really challenging for the people who would be all over us if they knew that we were available to find us and make their interest known. And so one thing that a lot of people do is they'll drop little hints, some subtle and some not so subtle. Sometimes things as blunt, which blunt is really useful here, by the way, as posting to Facebook about their being open to dating again. And, they're starting the search, which can inspire a lot of people who have been admiring from afar to get off their asses and write a little note and say, hey, so I've been crushing on you for the longest time, and sometimes it might take a couple of those notes before those people come crawling out of the woodworks, but they do. Hi, yes, Chandon, I am. I'm in front of the camera. But the other key is demonstrating emotional availability. And one thing that a lot of people do well that really, really works when the people that they're interested in are demisexual, namely people who are romantically interested. My apologies for that. We lost signal for just a moment. I'm sitting outside in the courtyard in Oakland, and unfortunately, as pretty as it is today, the wireless dropped. So I think it cut out when we were talking about demonstrating emotional availability, and one way that works really well for people who are demisexual, for people who are romantically attracted to people once they've gotten to know them, is to demonstrate emotional availability in their friendships. And this doesn't only work for demisexual people, this works really well for a lot of people who are amatonormative, who fall in love with people and are attracted to people and are open to dating people and or having sex with them, regardless of whether or not they already have had a chance to fall in love with this person. They're open to, their interest kicks in before the process has already started, in other words. That's a really good question, Chandan. That's actually something that's a little bit outside the scope of this video. But one way that is really helpful is to try hookup sites. Try using sites like Tinder and be really upfront about the fact that you're looking for a sex partner. Because a lot of times what people will do is they'll try to hide their intentions, and hiding intentions occurs as being creepy because that's a hidden agenda. Whereas if you come out and say, I'm looking for a sex partner, I'm really interested in that, and then talk about what you bring to the table and the types of sex that you like to have, then what people will do is the other people who are looking for a sex partner, who are looking for a one-night stand or who are looking for something ongoing, are more likely to respond to that. And there are lots of people in this world who are just looking to get laid or who are looking to have ongoing sexual connections. And so the more upfront you are about that, and the more you seek out sites and apps that are focused on hookups, then the easier that's going to be for you. Thank you for asking. I'll try to do a dedicated video on that topic soon. Alright, I think that about wraps it up for today. So if there aren't any last questions, then I'm going to go ahead and... Oh, I'm sorry, let me finish my thought. So demonstrating emotional availability in friendships. There are lots of different ways to do that. Whether it's being of service to someone, coming over to your friend's house and cooking for them, demonstrating, in other words, that you're a good partner in all of the ways that work for you to demonstrate that. For some people, they like to cook for the people they care about. For some people, it's being very emotionally supportive. And the key is to do this without an agenda. The key is to do this from a place of love for your friends. And that's very easy to do for a lot of people when they're just coming from love. But that's what I recommend doing when you are looking for love, is to come from love. Because the more you act like somebody who not only already has it, focusing on all the ways that you have it in your life, but the more you demonstrate it in the world, the more you share it, and while sharing it, show that you're open to receiving it, the easier it's going to be and the safer it's going to feel for other people to love you. Because for a lot of people, when somebody has their walls up very intensely, as a lot of people do after, for example, trauma, or after a relationship ends badly, or sometimes when they're dealing with depression, or just out of habit, that kind of thing, then it can be a lot of times distancing to the people around them. Humans are very funny creatures. In a lot of ways, we take our cues from the herd, and so, or the pack. And so when we see somebody who is acting like they are keeping everyone at a distance, then we will hold ourselves at a distance until they drop their guard. When they start to drop their guard, then we're going to feel safe being vulnerable with them, because we won't feel like there's something to be on guard against. We'll feel like they feel safe, which will help us feel safe. And I've seen this over and over and over again. And so the best thing to do, if you know that you're coming out of something like that, is to be patient and loving with yourself, to engage in coming from a place of love in your friendships and existing connections, and to see how much love you can let in while engaging in doing a lot of the self-worth work that we talked about earlier around shame, resilience, and vulnerability that can be so powerful. And what that does is that increases love of self. That also makes it higher and a lot easier to be close to other people, because there's less fear that any rejection will be devastating, because there's more emotional resilience around shame, which makes it easier to bounce back, which makes it easier to have discussions around any kind of conflict or negotiation or any kind of difficult conversation. And the clearer that you are on what you need in a relationship and what it is that you want and what your limits are, then the easier it is to tell whether or not somebody who crosses your path is likely to be a good partner. Because that's one of the other things that keeps people from having compatible partners in their lives, and that's spending too long with partners who aren't compatible, to the point where they don't have enough time and bandwidth left over for partners who are more compatible with them. And we've all had that friend who's pouring all of their time and energy into a relationship that is very important to them, but where there is a core disconnect, either in terms of values or in terms of important lifestyle factors, or just some kind of core disconnect or incompatibility between the two. It's not always an incompatibility that is fatal to the relationship. It might be an incompatibility that just means that the relationship takes additional work to flow smoothly. And that can be very worthwhile for the people involved. Those relationships aren't bad relationships, and I don't want to disparage them. But it's also important to recognize that that is additional work that goes into those kinds of connections. And so if you're entering into a connection and you see that there are a lot of your must-haves that aren't being hit, or if there are some things, maybe not your deal breakers, but negotiables or things that you can compromise on, but you would prefer not to, that are being hit, you might want to realistically evaluate, okay, is this important enough? Is this going to bring me enough joy that it's not going to feel draining to engage in that compromise? And that is why at the beginning I said that it's really important to focus on what you bring into a relationship and focus on building your strengths and showcasing your strengths first. Because when people are making those decisions, that is almost always what they look to first when entering a relationship and when deciding whether or not to stay in a relationship. They look to whether or not there is delight. And that's a normal human impulse. And if there's interest, I'll do an upcoming video on different ways that you can get skill sets that delight partners, and all of the ways that that can add satisfaction to relationships. I'm going to go ahead and sign off for now. I've got a few things to take care of this morning. I hope that all of you have a really wonderful rest of your day. Hi, Marty. And I appreciate you so much for joining me on this. Thank you so much. And I hope that each one of you has one or more compatible partners in your life.